Hi, everyone. Welcome to Fleet Equipment from the Floor ACT Expo 2023 post-show show.
The post-show show.
Post-show show, powered by Cummins. I'm Jason Morgan, Content Director for Fleet Equipment. And with me is David Sickles, Senior Editor for Fleet Equipment. David, great to have you.
Great to be here.
Hey, so we had a great time. Clearly, we're not at the show. So we're from the floor, but we're going to talk about the show. We're going to talk about what it means. We're going to talk about all the things that came across us as we had our conversations. I think I'm going to start with one of the big things that people were talking about is this show has grown considerably, right?
God, it's huge.
Year over year, it's moving to Vegas to an even bigger venue next year. And the sentiment is this is kind of becoming the trucking industry show.
Mm-hmm. I heard that a lot.
Okay.
Well, I was at the show.
Right. And, thinking about that, I've been thinking about that a lot since the show. What's interesting is I agree there's a lot of technology coming through. There's a lot of need for a show so that people can understand this technology as it comes out. But, what it also means to me in some regard is if you say this is the show, the tentpole show for the industry, does that indicate that this is just the way equipment speccing decisions are going to be made going forward? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Alternative maybe isn't the term now. It's just the show, the industry. You not only have to decide on diesel powertrains, but you're going to have to decide on lower emissions and sustainable zero emissions powertrains going forward.
Yeah. And like we talk about all the time, diesel can still be sustainable. You can become more sustainable using diesel fuel. So it's not just about that, alternative kind of moniker. It's about how you are kind of aligning your operations to be more sustainable no matter what your powertrain is.
Right. Yeah, it's the role that plays in greater sustainability. Decarbonization, I know we've often referred to NACFE's messy middle in battery electric, where there's an end point and a start point, and then we have to figure it all out. I feel like it's just now on a larger scale because it's not just battery electric, it's hydrogen, it's natural gas, it's all these other solutions that, to me, as a fleet, I would have to figure out how that fits into my applications and meets demands, right? It's not really unlike speccing transmission or axle ratios or tires or other things. It's a little scarier because it's new technology. You want to understand how it fits in your application. And yeah, you always knew to some degree you were getting a diesel engine. Now that's in question, right? You always had a choice of diesel engine, but now it's, do I go natural gas for the time being? What do I look for in hydrogen fuel cell and all those kind of questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the big takeaways from this show was all about the infrastructure. I mean, you're speccing your equipment. That's a huge part of it. And we all need to understand that and better understand it. There's all this new technology that we're running into that for the first time at this show, I'm seeing some new technology.
Right.
That's really important. But the infrastructure part of it, that is just as important, if not more important, than the equipment itself. Because if you are speccing a certain kind of equipment, if you're going for hydrogen fuel cell or battery electric or whatever it might be, if the infrastructure isn't there to support it, what are you doing? You've got to be able to get to the finish line with it, and they kind of have to go hand in hand. And that was a big part of DTNA's president keynote.
Right.
During the show. He was saying, hey, we've got the equipment.
Right.
We're ready with the equipment. Where's the infrastructure? It's still not at the level we need it to be.
Right. And speaking of that, we actually have a clip here. So here is a segment from John O'Leary, President and CEO of Daimler Truck North America, part of his keynote address where he talks about that infrastructure need. And I mean, it's really impressive and eye-opening. So here we go.
At Daimler Truck, we've calculated the dollar investment in charging infrastructure required to meet nationwide 2032 climate targets, and it will take roughly $52 billion just for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. That is the commitment required to meet the need for increased energy generation, transmission, and distribution, but it does not include the cost of real estate to site those charger installations. More immediately and locally, to meet California's requirements, 30 DC chargers per day need to be opened between now and 2026. It's clear that we cannot do this alone, even with the strength of our three companies. It's clear we cannot do this alone as an industry. There are more than 3,000 different electric utilities in the United States. Together with their regulators, they're focused on delivering cost-effective power to their customers. Understandably, those customers are unready to bear the brunt of rising rates to offset the cost of major infrastructure projects that they don't see as directly benefiting them. But to meet the requirements of regulatory action, to meet the ambitions of our nation and this industry, we need utilities to act now in order to create a bare minimum of operability.
So a great representation there of the now battery electric charging infrastructure need. And O'Leary was very, we've talked with him throughout the years as electric trucks have been rolling out. This year, talking with him, I had the chance to sit down with him pre-show because they did launch the Freightliner EM2 medium duty truck, and they had a preview event there before the show for media. I had a chance to sit down with him before his keynote. And I think this was one of the strongest cases for decarbonization and the reality of it, right? He was very clear that these conversations are happening. This isn't just a PR bullet point for companies or fleets. This isn't just something to please the board or operating members.
Yes.
These are how customers are making these decisions. They're really having hydrogen conversations. They're demanding more battery electric trucks. I mean, he was saying that hundreds more that they could sell in the e-Cascadias. They just need the infrastructure to do it, right?
And hundreds of trucks. I mean, that's a lot of trucks when you're talking about battery electric. Green Lane. So DTNA has a big part in bringing out Green Lane. They're partnering with NextEra and BlackRock on this. So Green Lane, it's putting in that infrastructure. It's trying to advance that infrastructure. Right. That's a big one. We also heard a lot about Watt EVs. They've got their own charging station that they're putting in at the Port of Long Beach, hoping that that's going to advance some things a little bit. One of the big things that I was hearing at the show, both during the educational sessions, during the keynotes, working with utilities. Now, sometimes you hear, okay, it can be kind of a pain. Sometimes, though, it can be, it's a real partnership. You know what I mean? You've got to get in there early. If these 18 to 24 month kind of runways to get those installed, it's too long. We need to shorten that up. We need to find ways to really get everybody on the same page so we can reduce that time.
Right.
But there are these programs that these utilities have to help advance that. I mean, we're working together, it doesn't have to be that pain. I feel like it becomes a pain when you don't realize what that runway is and you're trying to advance things as quickly as possible, as, we all want to. But if you're trying to do that and you're really pushing and it becomes less of a partnership, that's when it starts to fall apart a little bit. So working with the utility, just making sure that you're on the same page early, that's huge. Yeah,
and a lot of the OEMs have their e-mobility consulting groups.
Yes.
Right? Talking with Rakesh Aneja at Daimler Truck North America, he heads up their e-mobility segment. He had a great takeaway that was, the challenge is if you talk to one utility, you've talked to one utility. Like, that's it. Like, you kind of start from scratch every time you talk to someone, and now you have California is clearly big in it, right? But people are looking at Texas, they're looking at New York and the eastern seaboard side. So seeing how that will all play out, clearly California is leading in a number of ways, especially, and this came out during the show, in regulation.
Yes.
Something that came out like on the ACT Expo.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. Which is a scary thing. I mean, so it doesn't, I don't mean to say that. It's not scary necessarily, but what I find scary is all the huge amount of legislation all happening kind of simultaneously right now. And it's hard to understand. Obviously, I mean, these rule books are like 400 pages long. I mean, no one's reading these things. Right. And just understanding, okay, wait, where do my trucks need to be again? Right. What am I allowed to run? Where? I mean, that kind of thing can be scary until you start to understand it. The rule itself, not necessarily understanding, or scary, I'm sorry, but understanding everything that's going on at once, it can be tough.
It's a lot of complexity. It boils down to, I mean, the big headline was that in California, 2036, you cannot sell internal combustion engines, right? So clearly for trucks, that means diesel engines. Some trucks run gas engines. It also means, I mean, if you consider refrigerated transport, those trailer and truck refrigeration units, burn diesel to keep the loads cool. We're seeing a lot of ETRUs come out, right? Thermo King, Carrier, all having theirs come to the table.
Very cool technology.
And those have different subtle regulations and nuances compared to the trucks and power units, and everybody has a stake in this, right? So so really understanding, I mean, we're going to have a lot to talk about. I know we've started to dive into that. I've had a number of conversations on that already, but it's going to be something we're going to be following very closely. It's the new, if you think back on the EPA emissions regulations, which, it seems almost quaint now, but it was a huge, lowering NOx and soot and all the particulates. It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
It was a huge deal then. It was complicated. Manufacturers had to work through it. Fleets had to understand it. It feels like old hat now, and this is the new version of that. And I think what we're seeing too is, hey, what happens in California doesn't stay in California. There are states that will follow suit, and we'll just have to see where it goes.
Right. And we saw a lot of speakers at the show. They were showing maps. They're showing, okay, these states tend to follow quickly. These states are a little slower. But, you're right. It doesn't stay in California. It's something everybody needs to be aware of. And as these are coming out, we need to be understanding battery technology, where it's headed, how it works, all of these things. And during one particular educational session, it was all about EV batteries. A ton of it was over my head, to be honest. I mean, they were getting really nitty gritty. It was fascinating, but holy cow, they really got into it. But one really, really interesting point that was made was that you're seeing battery life from these different manufacturers. They're saying, okay, we've got, a 10-year warranty on this battery or whatever it might be. That 10 years, it's not necessarily the life of the battery. You need to think about where you're running the battery, how often you're fast charging this battery, how you're using the battery. It's more about the use of the battery that will signify the life of that battery. If you're really running this truck into the ground and fast charging it all the time, that battery life is probably going to be somewhat short. But if you're not doing that, if you don't have to fast charge it all the time, it's going to be a lot longer. And so the battery life, it's really hard to say, okay, this battery is going to last you 10 years and then you're good to go, or you need a new one. No, it's more about, okay, you need to understand what your application is, where you're using it, where you plan to use it. That's going to give you a better sense of battery life. And we're just kind of figuring this all out right now. I mean, to your point, it's new technology.
Can I complicate matters even further?
Please.
This year specifically, we've started to see the rise of medium duty battery electric vehicles as well, right?
Yep.
And it looks like, at least for the time being, EPTOs, so power takeoffs, right? So that is typically if you're running the body of a truck, a dump truck, a bucket truck, anything like that, right? In a diesel engine, you'd run the engine. It gets power to power the body. You raise and lower the booms. You raise and lower the bed. Everything's all good. You get on the road. EPTO is then having one battery pack on the truck chassis. So the battery pack that comes on the chassis, your battery pack, you need to use that energy to power your attachment or body on the truck, right? So now it doesn't even become about range anxiety, right? We've talked a lot about that, of course, you and I in the past. Now it comes about operational energy usage. Yes, especially you think about it, you have your local municipalities in bucket trucks, right?
Yep.
Working on things and they're running around. So the range isn't that crazy, right?
Right.
But they're going to operate that attachment for a couple hours. Yeah. That's going to drain the battery. So, figuring out those nuances, and every little application is going to be different in how they use the battery. So again, now it just becomes this, you start thinking about in terms of how do I want to use the energy to do work, right?
Yes. So, we're talking a lot about battery electric, but while we're at the show, we're also seeing all kinds of stuff, including diesel. I mean, a lot of diesel talk. There were, Valvoline, Shell, these traditional kind of diesel-centric companies are all there touting like, hey, you can decarbonize now still using diesel by integrating XYZ product or whatever it might be. And so that was a big deal. We did see a lot of battery electric, but it was all across the board.
Yeah, I think when you zoom out, and I spent a lot of time in the Cummins booth when we were running the show. They were a great partner. They hosted us a lot. seeing the different decarbonization solutions right next to the electrification zero emissions ones, right? So they had their internal combustion engine lineup. They had a cutaway of the of a Peterbilt 579 with the hydrogen engine in it, right?
Yeah.
So okay, now I can understand. I'm familiar with the inner workings of an internal combustion engine. The hydrogen fuel delivery system is new.
Yep.
But seeing it in a truck, it makes it approachable, right? They have the same kind of thing for natural gas. Their X15N platform will be rolling out here soon, kind of redefining the role of natural gas than it has been previously, I think. And there's more to come on that. But really understanding that and then sitting right next to, again, those zero emissions. Now it's Accelera by Cummins, right? That's how they're going to market on the zero emissions, battery electric, hydrogen fuel cell. It's kind of the umbrella under which they brought their acquisitions. So Meritor, Siemens, all that kind of comes under that brand now. Makes a lot of sense to understand there. But a collection of solutions is going to be the path forward, right? And a good demonstration of that, I thought.
Yeah. I mean, and you saw it. Like I said, you saw it across the board. You even saw, the cell-centric. They had at the Volvo booth, they had kind of their kind of prototype engine in there that you could kind of see. So that was cool.
Yeah, and what's striking too is any fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell, they're starting to look different too. Streamlined, a little smaller, a little more compact. We've seen some before in the past that, again, can be replacements for where the diesel engine sits now. But these are starting to look far different from ones we've seen at shows previous.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, David, hey, great job out there. Thank you for coming and sharing everything you learned on the floor. Appreciate everything.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, till next year.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now we're checking in with Jose Samperio, Vice President, General Manager, North America on highway for Cummins. We actually connected with him on the floor in one of the previous episodes, but we're going to get his takeaways from the show now that the dust has settled. Talk about where fleets' heads are at in terms of these new sustainable technologies and also the role of internal combustions in decarbonization engines. So here we go. Jose, great to see you again. I think the last time we caught up was at ACT, so good to connect here. Wanted to kick things off right away with what were your big takeaways from the show? What stood out from you with your time on the floor?
Yeah, thanks for having me and good to see you again. Last time we saw each other, it was a busy time over there. So there are a couple of things that stood out for me on the floor. Number one is the number of different technologies that are close to being available in the market. Some are not, some are in development, some are ready. But either way, the amount of investment that this industry is going through is pretty impressive when you compare back where we were 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, or even last year compared to now. It's pretty impressive how long way we've come in making investments.
Right. Well, and I think the Cummins booth was an excellent example of that because I'm pretty sure you had all segments represented there on the floor. In that regard too, so you're walking the floor, you're talking with customers. How serious are those conversations about investment in zero emissions equipment? In the short term and long term, are these serious conversations? Is it still kicking the tires on possibilities? Where's the industry at, do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think it's a spectrum, like many things in life, I guess. There is a spectrum of people that for many reasons they are ready to adopt. Either they have a customer base that is asking for it, they have the right operations that are conducive for these vehicles, they have the right funding, and everything is perfect for them to, I'm ready now to go and start purchasing these assets. And there are others that, again, idiosyncratic reasons of why they may not be a particular operation that is not conducive for these applications or these vehicles. Their customer base is not there, particular size of the company. So I think there is a wide spectrum. And there's definitely people on the left, meaning that I'm not quite ready, but I'm super interested. Or definitely people on the right of, no, I'm ready to start purchasing. Tell me what are the options and let's go in there. And everything in between. There are people that they want to learn before they take the next step, but certainly a lot of interest of what all of this is.
Right. And at least from my perspective too, in some of the conversations, a perspective on an actual business case, right? It's not just, will the technology work? Can it do the job? It's now, will it work for my business? What is the ROI look like? I mean, we're starting to get to the point where truck life cycles are kind of hitting that point where if you're going to make this leap, it's going to come here in the next 3 to 4 to 5 years as opposed to further down the line. So interesting to see how that's becoming more of a business reality.
Yeah, absolutely. You may have heard me say this before, that the very first question that we go through when, or customers ask us when we go through this is, does the technology get the job done? Meaning, I have an operation that works like this, and does this technology help me achieve those goals of my operation? Before they even ask about cost or anything else, is, can I get my job done? And then you move into the other aspects of, can I make a business case out of it? That's the cost part. And then you move into, do I have the infrastructure and do I have the service capability to do this? But the very first question is, can this technology get the job done? And can I make money with it?
Right. Yeah, lots of headwinds there, as you mentioned. Infrastructure for sure. We need technology like hydrogen to really propel some of the long haul applications. In that regard, kind of looking at Cummins as a whole too, what's important to know or remember about the internal combustion engines? And even, you had hydrogen on display, you had natural gas on display, you had even more efficient diesel on display. How does that work into these conversations and holistic decarbonization strategies?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way we think about it is the internal combustion engine is just what we call a prime mover. It's just a machine that generates power that now you put into the wheels. The other aspect of it is what kind of fuel you put into that machine. So there are two different ways to look at it. And if we just say internal combustion engine, diesel as one thing going together, that's not necessarily how things work. You have to think about the machine, how efficient that machine is, internal combustion engine, and then whatever fuel you put in. And first, not only can the machine be more efficient, because you've seen it in the past 20 years, we've gone a long way on this technology, making it more efficient, number one. And number two, we found ways to put ever cleaner fuels into that machine, whether it be a biodiesel blend or a natural gas blend, renewable natural gas blend, or even hydrogen now. And then now, all of a sudden, what used to be one technology, diesel internal combustion engine as one, now we're having an envelope of different possibilities that we can achieve with an internal combustion engine. Long run, I think it's a long run, a long way to go still for an internal combustion engine with different fuels.
Right. Well, and like you indicated before, it seems as if it's not so different from the speccing decisions that fleets are used to making, right? The technology is a little new, but you to your point, you got to make sure you get the job done. So application drives a lot of those decisions. And then, the productivity and efficiency, we're just kind of in some new technology worlds and options there. So very cool to hear that. I appreciate you taking the time. Wonderful to catch up with you.
Yeah, no, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for having me. It's exciting times for sure.
Hey, well, that's it. Thank you so much for joining us. We had a ton of fun bringing you all the news and insight from ACT Expo 2023. Again, we want to thank Cummins for being our partner on this project, and we will see you in Vegas next year.